So I don't know if people saw Angel Reese is starting a podcast just like every other athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I'm back on the same type of timing. Every athlete does not need a podcast. I don't need you to be out there spinning your narratives. I don't need you to be out there telling this story that you have. You have a small story to tell. You're not entertaining. You're not X, Y, and Z. It'll get boring in a couple of days. I personally think she'd be a great YouTuber because she does have a great YouTube channel. After that, hang it up, gang. Same thing that I said about who was the other one that started a podcast?
Trae Young.
No, it was one after Trae Young that we just recently talked about. And Damo was like, oh, no, we were talking about Draymond Green. Draymond Green and his words about the people doing the podcast.
It was Buzelis, though. It was Buzelis.
It was. And you know what? I found out it was actually Grady Dick. Why? No clue why he has a podcast. No clue why Grady Dick. Damo, you were caping hard for the young white boys having podcasts. You think Grady Dick should have a podcast?
Yeah, why not?
Welcome to the Dick Pod.
I'm going to say, what, you don't want to learn about the day in the life of the dick? Like, what are we talking about?
He has talked about his AAU stories with his AAU friends 90 times. No, nobody wants to hear that, bro.
And how many views does he have? Does he have an audience? Does he have people that's coming back to hear the dick tales of AAU?
I'm not gonna lie, he has less views than any of us. So
that's fine.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and introduce the topic then. So for those who do not know, Angel Reese is starting her own podcast, as Omar just said. And I do have the trailer for her podcast coming up right here. It is titled The Angel Reese Show.
Simple yet effective.
W marketing.
All right, this is the trailer. This is the trailer right here.
Angel Reese has been a blessing to girls basketball.
The most impressive rookie so far has been Angel Reese.
Look at all the brand deals that she has. The fame, the celebrity, and the newfound dollars.
I love that she's unapologetic. I love that she's authentic.
I feel like she's going to be a star.
Not only being the best on the floor, but also being unapologetically herself.
I got the keys to the kingdom. Ain't nobody stopping me now.
Launching September 5th. This is by the studio Playmakers. They are the same people who manage Shaquille O'Neal's podcast and Udonis Haslam's podcast as well. It does seem like this is going to be a very guest-heavy driven show. Just talked about, we're going to have guests every single podcast. We're going to get to the meat and potatoes. But Omar, if you want to expand on your take, why should Angel Reese not have a podcast?
And I believe she can get good guests. I just want to debunk a couple of things. One, there's not like this a massive amount of money in podcasting. The people that are getting massive amounts of money in podcasting have been in podcasting for years. The advertisers, and people talk about this all the time, notably Joe Budden, the advertisers and brand people, the secret is out on the podcasters. They put money behind the Michelle Obama podcast. They put money behind the Kim Kardashian podcast. They put money behind the Lamar Odom and Bruce Jenner podcast, or Caitlyn Jenner. I don't know if Bruce detransitioned or whatever. But nonetheless, that shit it doesn't reward to anything. So she'll get a sponsorship, but it's not going to be this crazy bag that people think it'll be. It'll be guest reliant, and then one day you'll run out of guests. Her focus is going to be basketball. She'll find more interesting things to do, like go to New York Fashion Week, and then it'll become a virtual podcast, and then she'll stop doing it. I don't think I think podcasting, especially for somebody like Angel Reese, is actually one of the worst ways that she could create content. She should actually hire a camera person to follow her around and do some more vlog type stuff. I think that would be 1,000 times better.
Now that I'm thinking about it, is there even an active NBA player that has a consistently successful podcast? Because I'm thinking about it.
Paul George. I'll say Paul George.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So Paul George. Outside of Paul George, who would it be? Because Mind the Game would be the next pod that comes to mind, but that stopped for obvious reasons. But even then, if you really watch like those first 3-4 episodes, I swear to God, they batch recorded those in like one sitting.
Yep.
So it wasn't like a weekly thing. And then it then became remote, like what Omar said. I believe the Trae Young podcast isn't a consistent podcast. Pat Bev might be a good answer. Draymond Green is not as consistent as he should as well, which is fine because again, you are in the NBA season cycle. But also in terms of making a good podcast, I don't think it is a good podcast when you are as inconsistent as these players are, though. So,
Well, if consistency
super
matters,
fair.
that's gonna be tough. But yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean-
don't know if consistency would matter for me to say it's bad or good. But that's just me.
I would just say if somebody wants to do a podcast, fuck it, let them do a podcast and see how it goes for them. Who knows? She can be the one that it actually works for and it pops for. I'm not sure how everybody felt about Shannon Sharp doing his own thing with the what is the name of the show? The Nightcap or Club Shay Shay, whichever one it is. I think it's the Nightcap.
One with Ocho?
But yeah, the one with Ocho.
That's a
No one initially thought that it was just going to pop the way it did, but eventually it caught on and he found his way. Now I understand the differences when we're talking about a Shannon Sharp versus active players. I can understand that. I'm just saying you never know until you know. And with Angel Reese, if this is something she genuinely wants to do, give it, let her do her thing. If not, it'll fall off. And it'll, again, I said this before. I don't know if I said this on the stream in a space. Podcasting for athletes is like doing music for athletes. Drop as much music as you want. Is this going to be serious for you, or is this going to be a fad? If this podcast is her fad, F it. It's her fad. Whatever.
To me, that's even more reason as to not do it. Like those people that did the music label as an athlete, the car dealership as an athlete, the restaurant as an athlete, and got into it after seeing 4, 5, 6 athletes from their same draft class or the same age group do the same thing and fail. That's dumb as fuck. Mind you, she has a YouTube channel. She has a YouTube channel right now, three videos on it. She has 35,000 subscribers. I just looked it up. All of them have like 200,000 views on it. And I've watched her content as a vlogger. She is interesting. She does interesting stuff in the vlog setting. She does interesting stuff as a person. She is a WNBA player, one of the few ones that, especially in her infancy in her career, has all the opportunity in the world. Like she was at all the fashion weeks, all the award shows. She has everything at her feet. And I think the worst way to put out content is her sitting down in a chair talking about her LSU days or her Maryland days or interviewing Flage, who already has a podcast. Like that shit is so stupid, gang.
I think the main reason why you think that, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it's because we're looking at the mindset of motherfuckers who want to do this full time, who knows what it takes to make a successful podcast, though. But I feel like when it comes to a lot of these athletes starting their podcast, it is on some, they don't really care about the algorithm. They don't really care about going full time. It truly is just a hobby for them. And I've always even said, when it comes to, like, when people ask me, yo, what should I do about this YouTube channel to grow? And I always say from the jump, yo, bro, if this is literally just a hobby for you, you have no aspirations of taking this seriously for real, going full time, making a bunch of money, growing to 1 million subs, literally do whatever you want, because it doesn't matter. You are just making videos for fun. You want to share it to the internet. You can talk about cooking in one video. Then you can talk about the NBA in next video because you truly don't care about the numbers. And I think ultimately for Angel, though, she has so much shit going on. I understand she's going to market it as this is something I'm really serious about, but I truly do think this is just a side passion project that if it fades out, it fades out. But if she wants to do it, ultimately, go ahead and do it. If it crumbles, it crumbles. But it is what it is.
I guess. I just think that her hobby would be the thing that she's already showed hobbies for. Like she's done the TikTok, the Instagram, and all that stuff, and it's been hobbies. She's done the YouTube, and it's been a hobby. If she wants to talk, I feel like if it was just a hobby, she would take it less seriously. She got caught up. She could. What you're saying could be true. She could get caught up in all the branding hype just because of her name. So when she does do anything, it'll be to this level. But fire up a Twitch stream, gang, or hop on Flage's podcast. Do something different. Starting this, because also what I don't like is the fact that you do this. You've brought in people who are dependent on this, because people are going to be dependent on this for you not to show up.
I would just say for her, it's a bit different than like the typical athletes we're thinking about with basketball in terms of NBA players, because of the fact that the WNBA season is so short and the off season is so long. So for an NBA player to start doing a podcast in the middle of their career, the most consistency you're really going to see from them, if they do want to do it, is going to be the off season. And then when the season comes around, sparingly, remote location, fall off, inconsistent. For a WNBA player, and I don't know how many WNBA podcasts there are, I'm a casual with this, but for a WNBA player, especially with them having a month, 2 months left of the season, It's supposed to start in September. The season ends October, right, Omar? End of September, October, in a way. My real test is going to be seeing what is she doing in March? What is she doing in April? If with this podcast thing, because if she's still going strong and consistent in the off season and she's genuinely doing what she wants, then we know it's real. But if by March, April, it's already remote. If by May's coming around, you got June, and they're looking about opening the next starting up the next season. If she's not going hard by then, I mean, hey, it was really just a hobby, not even a passion project, but genuinely a hobby.
She's doing Unrivaled, the new 3v3 league in January. She won't be doing this.
I mean, if it's a hobby, it's a hobby. I don't really got an issue with her doing a podcast on the side. I think we don't know to the extent, but we all know these NBA and WNBA players are insanely busy in terms of practice, let alone what we see on television.
And she need practice. She need practice.
Yes, she do.
Right. I'm not doing that. Shout out to Big Reese, never the little one. But what I will say is,
WNBA drumming.
That's why earlier I wasn't necessarily using consistency as a criteria for these podcasts. For me, I kind of want to see the quality of it. I actually am with Omar a smidge bit when he's talking about, is this just a couple of players talking about their glory days in high school and AAU and college and things like that? Or is there going to be genuine conversation or like news updates whenever they have the opportunity to? But I don't scale them to consistency. I think that's kind of unfair considering that this is still a hobby for them. But I'm talking about just the quality of the content. That's what helps me decide if things are a good podcast or a bad one. Like Paul George, I don't really have smoke for his because for the most part, yeah, every now and then they'll have some nostalgia. They'll have a nostalgia act on there, but then sometimes, yo, how the fuck did we lose to the Nuggets last night? And that's just cool. I'm with it.
Yeah. When it comes to the quality portion, though, I am very for, like, I think podcasting as a medium is geared towards when older people, when people are older in their life to start podcasts instead of earlier in their career. Now, again, like I said, the last time I said this, very hypocritical coming from me. But I will say, if I had to do things over again, I do believe on what I say. I feel like podcasting would have been completely different if, you know, in my years of being 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, I did learn more about basketball instead of saying the dumb shit I was saying back in the day. And then I came on and started a podcast, 27, 28, much more experience, maybe much more articulate with the way I say things and things of that nature. And now the quality of the podcast is much higher than what it could have been. An example I'd probably bring up is, like, let's just say, because AMP was trying to do a podcast, right? They was teasing that they even had a whole channel. But I'm thinking about it, it's like, for them, I feel like a podcast for them would be so much more interesting if they, you know, they spent their time right now in their 20s to go crazy the way they're going crazy right now, maximize that time span. And then when they start that podcast, when they are in their 30s, when, you know, they literally can't be doing the crazy shit that they're doing right now, to sit down and recollect those moments and talk about those moments that they had back in the day. Similar to what Gilbert Arenas is doing right now. Like, I don't know, that I feel like in your 20s, your main thing should just be focusing on the moment and creating the moments instead of talking about the moments, if that makes sense.
Well, just a little piggyback on what you said. Duke is already in his 30s, so I don't know how much time he has really to wait. But
let me say this. I think that's why Duke Dennis is a much better storyteller than the other members of AMP, just due to sheer life experience. The athlete, the in trouble kid, the military, the grinding 2K, the amount of women he's had to interact with, the amount of men that he's had to interact with in these different situations, the sheer experience that he has. And now he's gaining the experience of being on the celebrity side of things. The sheer experience that he does have by being an older person, just living life, is going to trump somebody who is, I don't know, like, let's just say there was a 17-year-old in AMP. Yeah, that 17-year-old may be lit, but that person can't even drink yet. But just got their driver's license yet. So the perspective that they're gonna have, like in that whole streaming and 9 to 5 conversation, I recorded a video about it. Like, it's cool to hear Kai's perspective on streaming and 9 to 5, but what's the job that Kai's worked? Respectfully, what's the job that Davis has worked? Six Flags for 2 days. But when we talk about Duke, who is older, who has worked jobs, who has been in the military, who has actually worked, that I want to hear that perspective. So for Angel Reese, yeah, you can get off the things that you want to get off from your college days. And really, if we talk about it, it's really LSU on. People did not want to hear about it in Maryland. You have a story from Maryland, but it's going to be very short-lived. People are going to want to hear about the LSU days. But then after that, your first year in Chicago, and then and who really suffers from that is Trae Young and those male basketball players, because you spent 1 year at Oklahoma, and then you got into the league, and you in year 2, 3. Well, what's your story?
He came in at 18. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
What the fuck is your story?
I mean, his story could have happened. His story could have happened yesterday. He can have another chapter. He's still writing the book. I mean, it's difficult.
It's unorthodox. It's a money farm. It's a money farm.
You can say it's a money farm, but people, especially people backing it, the people putting money behind, definitely think it's a money farm. They think they're gonna really reap the benefits of it. But I mean, for a guy like Trae Young, a guy like Duncan Robinson, a guy like Matters Buzelis, or whatever young guy or younger players, Angel Reese, who are trying to do their podcast, it's essentially telling the story while you're writing the book. Unorthodox as hell. It's a unique way to tell a story. A lot of these people are telling a story after the book is over, and now they're writing 2 different other books, and they're telling you about the first book. You got these people that are telling you about their story while they're writing it. I think that's dope. I think it provides a unique perspective, because it gives us that satisfaction that a lot of people that are into social media have now, where there's so much happening every day. It's new insight for what's going on today. So if something does happen crazy with Trae Young gets traded, then they got a podcast where he can go and let it out about Atlanta. Something happens with Angel Reese, whether she beats Caitlin Clark in the playoffs or whatever it is.
I gotta disagree.
She has the opportunity to talk about it right there on her platform, on her podcast, whenever.
The pushback that I got to give to that, and this will be the last thing I got to say, because this is what Draymond was talking about. It's the fact that you're still building those relationships. Once you get to a certain point and you have even the brain power to build different perspective and be free thinking and say what you want to say, that's perfectly fine. But a lot of players talk about this often. I can't just come out and say what I really felt like during my Hawks tenure, because Trae Young doesn't know if he's going to need a job in 8-9 years, and he might need to circle back around to the Hawks. How many people have we seen as players rotate from the same couple of teams over and over again? It's because they built those relationships, so they know they can always have room at the table. But if Trae Young gets hurt, or even I listened to Isaiah Thomas on the Knuckleheads, the Boston Celtics Isaiah Thomas. He can't lash out on the Celtics right now, because guess what? He's trying to get a fucking job, and people look at that stuff. But when you don't care, and this is what Draymond was saying, when you're established, you got 4 rings into the league, and you don't give a fuck, people are going to be begging for you to be on their team or not. He can come on there and say what the hell he want to say. He can talk shit about Rudy. He could talk shit about what the Wizards is doing. He could talk all that shit, and don't nobody care. Because guess what? I know we might not like him as a player. A lot of people would like to have Draymond on their team, even as just a end of the bench locker room guy.
I think the biggest example is Paul George, when he was talking about his time with the Clippers. And Paul, what really happened in the season?
Come on.
Was ball movement. Our hustle guys weren't there.
We had hustle guys, and then I'm not saying it's James' fault, but then there was a trade. Not saying it was James' fault. Like, all right, well, I get it.
Not saying it was James' fault though. I'm starting to think, and because even in that clip, I don't think there was necessarily a guest there. I know this is like a how the hell did you get here moment, but I'm starting to think that like scheduled guests are like a bad thing for these NBA podcasts, because when we're talking about the things we like, or the ways that an NBA players podcast could succeed, in the sense of, hey, update on current moments, talk about things that are going on recently if you're a younger player, versus having nostalgia acts in high school that, yeah, sure, a certain audience will care about, certain ones don't. I think you hinder that ability to do that kind of content when you have, in 3 weeks, we're going to have B-Pods on. So we're going to have to talk about B-Pods' story. And then he ain't got no story, as Omar was describing earlier. So now y'all are talking about high school again. And then the week 4, now we got to bring on SAR. So like, I think unironically, and it sounds crazy because there's obvious positives to having different guests, let alone NBA player caliber guests on your podcast. But I'm starting to think that in terms of quality of podcast, that's actually more harmful than it is helpful.
Let me be clear. I am for her having her own platform. The conversations I am having is just, okay, cool. You can have your podcast. I'm for you having a voice. I do think that's fantastic that we live in an era that players have their own platforms, have their own voice, instead of us having to sit down and listen to what the fuck Stephen A has to think about these players and make these assumptions based off of what Stephen A said. However, if I'm just talking about the quality of it, quality is gonna be ass. That's just my main thing.
If she get on there real quick, if she get on there and say, I ain't gonna lie, Caitlyn a bitch, me.
So that is the only thing I will give her, is like, she's way more of an unapologetic person than Paul George.
Got the personality for it.
So if we're talking about the holding back factor, if there is one athlete right now that I feel like would not hold back, it would be Angel.